Every time you crack open a beer, you're repeating something your ancestors did every single day for millions of years and not just for fun. New research suggests early humans and their primate relatives may have been mildly intoxicated on a near-daily basis, and it might be one of the strangest reasons our species survived at all. Here's the tension. Alcohol is toxic. It damages cells, impairs judgment, and by every evolutionary logic, animals should avoid it. So why did our bodies evolve to specifically crave it? And later in this video, we'll get to something even stranger evidence that the invention of alcohol may have come before the invention of bread, meaning the thing you think civilization was built on for survival might actually have been built for a buzz. Let's go back further than any human city, further than agriculture, further even than fire. 10 million years ago, in the humid forests of what's now Africa, the ancestors of gorillas, chimpanzees, and humans spent their days foraging for fruit. Fruit that fell from the trees didn't stay fresh. Wild yeast, floating invisibly in the air, landed on that sugary flesh and began to feed. The sugar turned to alcohol. This wasn't rare. In a dense forest, rotting fruit was everywhere, and it was faintly alcoholic almost by default. Here's where it gets personal. Somewhere around that same 10 million year mark, a single genetic mutation appeared in the digestive tract of our shared ancestor. It altered an enzyme called ADH4, and it made that enzyme 40 times more efficient at breaking down ethanol. Before this mutation, alcohol would have made an animal sick fast, sluggish, vulnerable to predators. After it, alcohol became something the body could actually process and use for energy. Biologist Matthew Kerrigan, who helped uncover this mutation, has argued it likely wasn't an accident of nature, it may have been favored by evolution itself. In other words, the ability to metabolize alcohol efficiently might be baked directly into your DNA right now, inherited from a fruit-eating ancestor who could handle fermented food better than its rivals could. This is the foundation of what researcher Robert Dudley calls the drunken monkey hypothesis. His idea is simple but radical. The smell of alcohol, faint as it was in fermenting fruit, became a signal. It told our ancestors food is here, and it's ripe. Animals that could detect and tolerate that smell got to the best calories first. Over time, natural selection didn't just tolerate a taste for alcohol, it rewarded it, which means the same neurological reward system that makes a modern human enjoy a glass of wine may be a multi-million-year-old survival tool, repurposed. But smelling fermented fruit in a forest is one thing. Deliberately creating alcohol is something else entirely, and that leap forward takes us to a place carved directly into a hillside in southeastern Turkey. Roughly 11,600 years ago, in a place archaeologists call Göbekli Tepe, hunter-gatherers built the oldest known monumental structures on Earth, massive carved stone pillars, arranged in circles, decorated with animals, predating Stonehenge by about 6,000 years. This was long before agriculture, before permanent villages, before anyone had domesticated wheat as a food crop. And yet, researchers examining massive stone vats at the site found residue consistent with fermentation, the chemical fingerprint of ancient beer making. Huge quantities of it, enough to suggest that groups of hunter-gatherers might have traveled from far away, gathered at this site, and brewed alcohol together as part of communal. Possibly ritual, feasting. This challenges something almost everyone assumes about the birth of farming. The traditional story is that humans domesticated wild grains because they needed reliable bread, and only later, almost accidentally, discovered that grain could ferment into beer. But some archaeologists, including Patrick McGovern, often called the Indiana Jones of ancient booze, have proposed something closer to the opposite. What if the desire to produce alcohol, not bread, is part of what pushed hunter-gatherers to start deliberately cultivating grain in the first place? It's known as the beer before bread hypothesis, and it's still hotly debated. Not every archaeologist agrees grain domestication was primarily about brewing bread, making evidence is old too, and both may have developed side by side. But the presence of large-scale fermentation vessels at a site built before agriculture is hard evidence that alcohol wasn't a later luxury. It might have been part of the plan from the very beginning. Now here's the twist that connects it all. If prehistoric people were fermenting fruit, grain, and even honey, this wasn't occasional. Fermentation happens fast, and it happens easily, without refrigeration, without preservation, in warm climates especially. That means many researchers now argue that mild, low-level alcohol consumption was a near daily part of ancient diets for thousands of years, not a special occasion, but closer to a background feature of everyday survival food. If you're starting to realize your ancestors might have been buzzed more often than sober, you're not alone, and there's a reason this story matters more than trivia. So stick around, because next we'll look at why this might have shaped human society itself. If any of this is blowing your mind a little, that's exactly the kind of thing this channel digs into. Hit subscribe so you don't miss where this goes next. Because alcohol didn't just fuel individuals. Some anthropologists argue it helped fuel cooperation. Ancient beer, in particular, was often thick, nutritious, and lower in alcohol content than what we drink today, closer to a fermented gruel than a modern pint. It provided calories, some vitamins, and safer hydration than untreated water in certain environments, since the brewing process could kill some pathogens. But its social role may have mattered just as much as its nutritional one. Shared drinking rituals appear again and again at ancient gathering sites. Alcohol lowers social inhibition. It can make cooperation, bonding, and trust building faster among people who might otherwise be wary strangers. Some researchers believe that communal fermented drinks, consumed at gatherings like the ones suspected at Göbekli Tepe, may have helped strengthen the very social bonds that allowed larger, more complex human communities to form in the first place. Think about what that means. The behavior that built modern civilization's largest early monuments may be tangled up with the same behavior happening in bars and backyard barbecues today. Different century, same basic biological trick, running quietly underneath thousands of years of human history. Of course, none of this means ancient humans were walking around in a constant drunken haze. That's an important distinction. Most fermented ancient beverages, from early African palm wines to early Near Eastern grain beers, were far weaker than modern distilled alcohol, which didn't exist yet at all. Distillation is a much later technology. What ancient people were likely experiencing day to day wasn't intoxication in the way we picture it now: heavy drinking, hangovers, blackout nights, but something more like a mild, steady undertone. Slightly fermented fruit here, a thick, low-alcohol grain drink there. Enough to be pharmacologically active, enough to matter biologically, not necessarily enough to impair survival. And that's really the heart of the discovery. For a species that depended on sharp reflexes, careful decision-making, and constant vigilance against predators and rivals, you'd expect alcohol to have been evolution's enemy. Instead, it appears again and again in our enzymes, in our earliest monuments, in the biochemistry of the fruit our ancestors depended on for survival, almost like a quiet partner running alongside human evolution the entire time. So the next time you're at dinner, sharing a drink with friends or family, consider this: the specific pleasure you feel, the slight relaxation, the sense of connection around the table. That response didn't start with a bartender or a brewery or even with agriculture. It may have started in a forest 10 million years ago with a distant ancestor who could smell ripening, fermenting fruit on the forest floor and, thanks to one lucky mutation, could actually enjoy it instead of getting sick. Civilization's oldest stone temples may have been built, in part, around a drink. And every time modern humans gather to share one, whether it's beer, wine, or something else entirely, they may be participating in one of the oldest, most quietly influential rituals our species has ever known, one that helped shape who we became. Long before anyone wrote a single word of history down,